Last week, I made a video about SoFi's student loan lawsuit where they basically filed a formal complaint to the Department of Education and Miguel Cardona, the Secretary of Education in the Biden administration. This was something that was seen as a huge negative move from a PR perspective, huge amounts of backlash, politicians lashing out at SoFi, and in this video, I'm going to be walking through a Dave Ramsey clip posted earlier today where Dave Ramsey on his show bashed SoFi for the student loan lawsuit. And I found a couple of interesting tidbits that I think will help us form a blueprint for the media backlash of this move going forward. So let's take a look. Okay, so just starting out, this video is titled "SoFi is losing millions over this," a nice clickbaity title. This is from the Dave Ramsey Show Highlights channel, which has 2.6 million subscribers. And in the last 16 hours since this was posted, this has already received 55,000 views. Now, obviously, that's a lot in that short amount of time. Dave Ramsey commands a large audience, which makes clips like these very important, especially considering what they're saying for SoFi and how that shapes sentiment. The assumption that we're making here, of course, is that people will view clips like these and make an emotional decision, or people will read headlines on articles and make an emotional decision. So this is very important. Now, as a recap, I discussed the student loan lawsuit more in depth on a Twitter Spaces on Friday. I explained the specifics around the news in a recent video. If you're not caught up with the basic details, I suggest you watch that video next. Main considerations around this lawsuit is basically asking yourself whether SoFi can win this case. In my opinion, it seems that they have a strong foundation to be entitled to a win, and then asking yourself whether this is a trade-off that we want to make with a payout in the short term. SoFi claimed about $25 to $30 million in lost profits, which hypothetically speaking they would be entitled to if they were to win some type of lawsuit, versus the negative brand image in the long term. Many politicians, for example, are branding SoFi as a villain in this big bank versus struggling student narrative that they're painting the company in. They're saying that SoFi only cares about money. In a clip that you're about to see in just a second, Dave Ramsey is basically painting SoFi in these very harsh terms as a result of this news. So that is definitely a negative brand image that SoFi has to overcome in the short term. And ultimately to make the consideration that if SoFi is the company that ends the moratorium and brings back the repayment of student loans, how likely will people be to then turn around and refinance their loans with SoFi if SoFi is essentially the one that ended the golden period of people never paying back their loans, right? So there is some type of negative brand association that has the potential to stay for a longer term, just in my opinion. And in my personal opinion, it was somewhat of a brash move, especially considering that this issue had already been flagged, was in the hands of the Supreme Court, and we were pending some type of resolution in the next couple of months. However, on the other hand, this does add more pressure to the topic, and presumably this pressure can help the Supreme Court reach a decision faster. So without further ado, going into the main reason I wanted to do this video was to react on this Dave Ramsey clip. And the reason why I wanted to do it is because this is exactly the type of negative sentiment that we're going to continue to see with SoFi around the student loan lawsuit until this is all resolved. So let's first take a look at that.
Our buddies over at SoFi, which run the little sweet nurturing commercials about how much they love you, and then they sell you crappy financial products. They got a nice stadium, though.
So already you can see the
Everybody needs a nice
bias.
stadium. If you're going to sell crappy stuff, you should have a nice stadium.
With all the profits you make from your crappy stuff.
There you go.
And one thing I want to just highlight here immediately is that everybody you watch online, everybody you read about online, everybody you talk to, realistically speaking, they're going to have some type of bias built in. In this case, Dave Ramsey's entire brand is getting out of debt, staying out of debt, being financially free. So naturally, a company that provides student loans or personal loans and makes profits off of giving you loans is going to go against Dave Ramsey's whole brand. So he's going to be against that as a whole, regardless of what he thinks of SoFi versus some other lender. He's going to be against lenders in general because his entire brand is becoming debt free.
Well, now they're getting into the student loan fight. There's an article that said SoFi Bank sues to block Biden's student loan payment pause. So this is another lawsuit, y'all. And it's not even just to stop the program, it's to stop the pause. The article says a private bank is trying to force the Biden administration to end its pause on federal student loan payments, arguing the moratorium has no legal basis and has cost the bank, known for its refinancing business, millions of dollars in profits.
About hundreds of millions.
That just makes me want to throw up a little bit right there. Like, if
Well, that
you,
kind of tells you what's going on now.
their motivation obviously is so pure.
Yes.
It says in the federal lawsuit filed Friday in Washington, SoFi Bank asked a federal judge to overturn President Joe Biden's latest extension on the payment pause. Student loan payments were first halted at the start of the pandemic by President Trump. The pause has been extended 8 times over the last 3 years. The bank says its federal student loan refinancing business has suffered because borrowers have little incentive to refinance while payments and interest are on hold. At a minimum, the lawsuit asks a judge to limit the pause only to borrowers who are eligible for the Biden cancellation plan. Biden's latest extension, which was announced in November and could stretch as far as this summer, is unlawful on multiple grounds, the lawsuit claims. The plan is currently being challenged in the Supreme Court, which is expected to rule by June.
You know, this is interesting. The extension, the pause was basically under emergency times in a
Right.
pandemic, and it was emergency powers, if you will, granted to the president to help things, and it has moved from him, Trump first, and then later even Biden, helping people during the pandemic make it through their student loans. It's moved from that as a motivation to now I just don't want them to have to pay their student loans, so I'm just going to kick the can, and I'm the guy that can do that. But there's no emergency anymore, so I think even though I think SoFi's pretty scummy, it probably stands for Scummify, but I think there's probably a basis for their lawsuit.
I know. Well, and even
It's not like it's not like you can go, we have to extend the student loans because of the pandemic. Or like, wait a minute, it's over, dude. It's over. Nobody's wearing a mask, dude. Fauci's gone, dude. I mean, really, you need to catch up. That's so 2020. I mean, really. And, it's like he doesn't have that power on that basis anymore.
Well, and that's what they're even
Immediately, I mean, they're not trying to hide any of their bias. Dave Ramsey calls them scummy, calls their products crappy. The other co-host says she wants to puke a little bit and makes a sarcastic remark around, oh, I bet their motivations are so pure when they do this. And then when you actually see the specifics of the arguments that are presented in that complaint, which I covered in that video, basically the emergency powers granted by the CARES Act don't apply to the extension that was extended by the HEROES Act. Dave Ramsey's like, wait a minute, they do have a basis here, because it just highlights the fact that this has been going on for 3 years and there's really no basis by which it should be going on. And so it sort of snaps people from this reality that has become the new normal of people just not paying their student loans, and that's okay.
saying with the whole cancellation plan right now is he's trying to cancel it, based on what happened in the pandemic. And they're like, that's over. Like, how can we cancel it based on that? So even so far in the Supreme Court case, there's a lot of skepticism from the judges going, wait a minute, how does this connect? And how can you use this reasoning if you're also saying the pandemic's over? So,
of course, the education department comes out and says it's an attempt by a multi-million-dollar company to make money while they force 45 million borrowers back into payments, which is actually true. It is an attempt by a multi-billion-dollar company to collect interest on the loans that they have. I mean,
and also to
that's
get more
true.
people to refinance. Which I'm like, isn't that horrible marketing to be like, we're going to stop the pause and now you should come refinance with
when
us.
they were thinking about filing.
So there you go. She brought up a great point, right? Essentially the point that I brought up earlier to say, well, if SoFi is the one that's bringing this back, how likely would that person be just to refinance with SoFi if for the last 3 years they didn't have to pay any of their interest on their student loans, and essentially now SoFi is the one that forces them to pay again? That person might say, okay, like I'm forced, I might have to do it. Why would I go with SoFi? Like, it's sort of that Robinhood situation, right? When Robinhood stopped trading on GameStop, people just didn't want to use them on principle alone. And that is a situation that I fear that SoFi needs to rehabilitate that brand image, because clips like this will come out and they'll get tens of thousands of views in hours, and people will only read the surface high level headlines, and then they're going to make decisions based on that.
Thinking about filing this lawsuit, did they not consult their PR department?
Yeah, I'm like,
The lawsuit
that's so
drew
sketchy.
swift condemnation from borrower advocates who called it a money grab at the expense of those struggling with student loan debt. Well, it could be at the expense of the taxpayers right now, and I didn't have a student loan debt.
Dave Ramsey mentions the fact that there is a moral argument now that is being made by these politicians. You know, the poor, struggling student who needs this because they can't pay back their loan, and this money hungry, greedy corporation that basically just is looking out for their bottom lines. And then he says, well, it could be at the expense of the taxpayer because for this whole time they haven't been paying all of those student loans.
When all this started. Did you? No?
Mm-mm.
So we're paying the interest right now.
And there you go.
So, because it's not, yeah.
I think it's just important to highlight, too, that these companies, they don't care about you.
Well,
There's
just everybody in the article is evil.
Well, it's like they're going to put out...
the government, the Supreme Court, the education department, SoFi. There's no angels in here.
There's no angels in a lot of this process. This whole debate on student loan forgiveness.
It's like all villains. There's no... Where's the hero? All villains in the story. It's a horrible story.
So keep in mind, I mean, this is one of the main arguments that's going to be coming up, is saying, well, you know, SoFi might have a point in why they're doing this, but they're still evil for doing it. Like, there is a logical and then there's an emotional side of this argument. And politicians, they're always going to push people to that emotional aspect, which paints SoFi in a negative light, even while acknowledging the logical aspect, which is essentially what, you know, Dave Ramsey and his co-host are doing here. They're saying, oh, wait, it makes sense, and they shouldn't have been extended for this long, but SoFi's still evil for, you know, pointing this out.
A villain story.
But then when you see the SoFi commercial after all this, where everybody's holding hands and they're there to help you and they're so friendly.
We help you get out of debt by borrowing on our stuff.
Remember
you didn't
this.
Really get out of debt. You just borrowed the debt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
So
You're right.
sketchy.
No love lost for the Biden kicking the can. No love lost for the education department. No love lost for SoFi, for dadgum sure.
But also a good reminder to start paying on these loans. Like,
Hello.
This is
now.
all not looking good.
Right now.
Like, we've been waiting for a long time for decisions, and as this is playing out, it's not looking good.
It's a very complex take because essentially the Department of Education or the Biden administration as a whole is not the winner. SoFi is not the winner. The person paying back the loan is not the winner. Like, who wins in this situation? They're saying, well, it's good for you to pay off your loans because, again, this is their entire brand, is pay off your loans, be financially free. And so that's obviously the stance that they're going to take. Again, there's a logical and an emotional side of this argument. And right now, SoFi is going to be the bad guy, either in one of those fronts or in both of those fronts.
At the same time, we told you not to buy crypto. We told you to get out of debt because it's not going to be forgiven. When all the smoke clears, you're going to pay it. So quit acting like it's not there. Denial is not a river in Egypt. You need to actually not be in denial, okay? You're going to have to pay it. Pay your loan now, as fast as you possibly can. You keep waiting on the cavalry to come over the hill, and it looked like Joe Biden in the lead. It's not. It's Custer's last stand. They're not going to make it, okay? Not coming. They're not coming. They're not coming. You are in charge of your life. You have to fix your life. SoFi is not going to fix your life. They're coming for your throat. The government's not going to fix your life. They're going to lie to you to get your vote and then do nothing. They do that all the time. They are specialists at appearing to do something and nothing occurs. That is like a Washington art form, okay? We are going to announce a new program today that's going to have absolutely no effect, but we're going to try to impress you with it anyway. And this is what they do full freaking time up there.
Ugh,
it's just ridiculous.
It's so sad to watch it, too, happen with real lives. These are real people who are freaking out about their student loans.
Pay them off.
They've been waiting. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I can't afford to pay it off.
Get 6 jobs.
And the payments are coming. Like, the payments are coming. That's going to happen. Like, you have to carve out space. You can't, like, you have to pay those back.
It's not going away. It's not going away. You can't bankrupt them. You're going to pay it. They're not going to forgive them. You should have already done it. And what you just watch the cast of characters here. Everybody in the story is a villain. You're the only hero. Be a hero in your own story. Roll up your sleeves. Get your butt in gear. Get these things paid off and quit whining about. Shut up. 6 jobs. It's what normal people do. It's called calluses on your hands. wussification of America. Get out there, get it done. Seriously.
Interestingly, that they painted everybody as a villain, the government as a villain for doing this. SoFi is a villain because there's no altruistic motives here. They're just going for the bottom line to line their own pockets. You need to be the person that's paying off your loans. And I really like that message, right? Because, I mean, regardless of just being in a SoFi echo chamber of only wanting to hear good things, it's fine. I understand that Dave Ramsey and his whole brand has a certain bias associated with that, but I really like the message because it grounds the viewer in reality that student loan repayment is coming and you should be ready for this, because I think that that also softens the blow a little bit after that Supreme Court decision is made and after the moratorium is ended and these people suddenly find themselves with an extra payment that they have to make that they haven't had to make in the last 3 years. So I really enjoyed that clip. I hope you enjoyed that too. Thank you to somebody who posted it on Twitter. Overall, I think student loans and this whole lawsuit is going to be a huge point for SoFi because it's going to affect their bottom line. Whether they're going to end up with that 25 to 30 million in extra profits as a recompensation from that lawsuit, or whether they're simply going to end up closing out the moratorium and resuming student loans. And what that backlash is going to be going forward from a PR perspective are two things that remain to be seen. I want to see whether this affects their member growth, whether this affects the flywheel, or whether this affects their deposit number. So definitely a high risk move from SoFi, and clips like these just really emphasize the different aspects that these different parties will take per their own motives. I mean, Dave Ramsey, who has his own bias, even highlighted that the politicians have ulterior motives and they will happily paint SoFi as the villain to further their own agenda. So safe to say that this is going to be an interesting and very delicate issue that SoFi has to navigate over the next coming weeks and months until that Supreme Court decision is reached in the summer. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more SoFi news, updates, and commentary, subscribe to the channel. For right now, this is the Fundamentals of Investing podcast. Thank you so much for listening.